The studio was tense before the cameras even started rolling. Vicente Gonzalez, a Democrat known for his fiery rhetoric on border security, was already leaning forward in his chair, flipping through a stack of notes. Across from him sat Karoline Levitt, calm but visibly focused, her hands clasped together as if she was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The segment's topic was clear: the escalating border crisis. But what no one in the audience knew was that this conversation was about to spiral into one of the most talked-about political clashes of the year. From the moment the host introduced them, Vicente launched into a full-throttle rant. "This crisis is the fault of extreme right-wing fearmongers," he said, stabbing his finger in Karoline's direction. "You exploit human suffering for political gain. You have no solutions, only slogans." Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned back slightly, letting him finish every word, as if she was taking mental notes on every accusation. The camera caught her smirking for a brief second, and Twitter would later explode with that single frame. When Vicente finally paused to take a breath, the host turned to Karoline. "Your response?" She leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. "Congressman, if you think Americans are too stupid to see what's happening at the border, you're underestimating them, and me. You've been in Washington for years, throwing money at a problem you refuse to solve, and the only thing you've accomplished is making it worse." The audience gasped. Vicente's jaw tightened. This was no longer going to be a polite debate, it was war. And here's the thing, the more Vicente raised his voice, the more Karoline seemed to sharpen hers. She began pulling out statistics, eyewitness accounts, and yes, stories from border agents she had spoken to personally. "Do you want to talk about human suffering? I've been there. I've seen children sleeping on concrete floors while you're giving press conferences," she fired back. Even the host struggled to keep control as the tension grew. This wasn't just about immigration policy anymore. It was about credibility. And Karoline was making sure Vicente's crumbled in real time. Vicente adjusted his tie and tried to regain control of the narrative. "You can throw around your cherry-picked statistics all day, Karoline, but the truth is, compassion matters. We're talking about families seeking a better life. You wouldn't understand that, you've never been on the other side of the border." That was his first mistake. Karoline's eyes narrowed, and she leaned in, her voice dropping to that deadly calm tone that means trouble. "Congressman, I've been to the Rio Grande Valley. I've talked to families, both American and migrant, whose lives have been destroyed because your policies have turned our southern border into a dangerous free-for-all. Don't lecture me about compassion when your solutions encourage cartels and traffickers to operate freely." The audience murmured, sensing the shift. Vicente was trying to frame himself as the moral high ground, but Karoline had just ripped away the illusion. She didn't stop there. "And since you like to question my experience, let's talk about yours. You've been in office long enough to see this crisis spiral out of control under your watch. You've voted against common-sense security measures, multiple times. That's not compassion. That's negligence." Vicente tried to jump in, but she cut him off. "And before you accuse me of politicizing this, maybe explain to the American people why your district's border communities have some of the highest crime rates in the country since you took office." The host shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just a debate, it was a public dissection of Vicente's political record. By now, the live chat feed was exploding. Viewers were already picking sides. Comments like, "She's ending his career right now," and "Vicente walked into a buzzsaw," were flooding in. Vicente's voice rose. "This isn't about me." Karoline's reply was instant. "It is about you, Congressman. It's about the people who trusted you to fix this problem, and instead, you gave them speeches. You blame others because it's easier than admitting your failure. But Americans are smarter than that, and tonight, they're watching you run out of excuses." The room went silent. Vicente leaned back, his jaw locked, while Karoline sat still, her posture radiating quiet confidence, the kind that tells you the fight is far from over. Vicente took a deep breath, trying to hide the fact that Karoline's last strike had landed hard. "You talk a lot about failures, but you have no plan, Karoline. Just sound bites for your base. Karoline tilted her head, smiling faintly. No plan? Congressman, my plan starts with enforcing the law, something you've conveniently avoided mentioning tonight. Secure the border with physical barriers where needed, deploy technology to detect illegal crossings, and give Border Patrol the resources they've been begging you for. Vicente tried to interject, but she didn't give him the chance. And while we're at it, we shut down the loopholes that human traffickers exploit every day. You know this, but you vote against it because it doesn't fit your party's narrative. The tension in the studio was electric. Viewers could almost feel the pulse of the confrontation through their screens. Vicente leaned forward. Karoline, these are complex humanitarian issues. She cut him off with a sharp laugh. Complex? You call it complex, I call it chaos. And the truth is, the chaos benefits you politically. You posture as a champion of compassion, but every tragedy at that border is another talking point for you. It's disgusting. The moderator glanced nervously at the producers, sensing that control of the segment was slipping. Karoline wasn't just debating, she was dismantling. She turned to the camera, locking eyes with the audience. Ask yourself this: how many more fentanyl overdoses, how many more victims of trafficking, how many more dangerous criminals slipping into our country will it take before people like Congressman Gonzalez stop hiding behind speeches and start doing their jobs? A ripple of applause broke out from the studio audience, breaking the tension for a brief moment. Vicente, visibly frustrated, tried a different tactic. You think you can stand here and lecture me about the border when you've never had to make these tough calls in office? Karoline's voice dropped low, almost a whisper, but every word was sharp enough to cut. I may not hold your title, Congressman, but I have something you've lost: credibility. And when the people see the truth, titles don't protect you anymore. She leaned back in her chair, letting the silence hang. The message was clear: this wasn't going to end with Vicente walking away unscathed. Vicente's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being cornered like this on live television, and the flicker of frustration in his eyes gave him away. Karoline, this isn't a campaign rally. This is real governance. You can't just throw red meat lines to rile people up. Karoline leaned forward, elbows on the desk, her gaze never leaving his. You mean lines like, secure borders save lives? Congressman, that's not red meat. That's reality. And the fact that you dismiss it as political theater says everything about how detached you are from the pain your policies cause. He opened his mouth, but she didn't let him breathe. Do you remember the case of the 17-year-old girl found in the back of a trailer last month? She was smuggled across because the cartels know our enforcement is weak. She died before she ever had a chance to step on American soil. You stood in front of a camera and talked about systemic reform while her family buried her. How do you sleep at night, Congressman? The studio fell silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Vicente's hand twitched slightly as he adjusted his tie, a small tell that the pressure was getting to him. Karoline, you're simplifying something that is costing lives every single day, she finished for him. And you know what the worst part is? You've been in a position to fix it for years, but you haven't. Instead, you choose to villainize anyone who calls you out, because the moment you admit the truth, you lose the one thing you really care about: control. Her words hit like a hammer. The camera caught Vicente blinking rapidly, his polished composure slipping away. The audience in the studio began murmuring, some nodding, others leaning forward, sensing the turning point. Karoline took a slow breath, then delivered the line that would ignite the clip across social media within minutes. You can attack my age, my experience, my politics, but you can't erase the facts. And the fact is, under your watch, the border is more dangerous than ever. That's not my opinion. That's your record. The crowd erupted, applause, whistles, a few audible gasps. Vicente tried to recover, but it was too late. The tide of the room had shifted entirely. Vicente forced a smile, the kind politicians use when they're bleeding but want the audience to think they're in control. You're twisting my words, Karoline. I've always supported a secure border. Karoline didn't even blink. Really? Let's test that. She reached under the desk, pulled out a stack of printed quotes, and held them up for the camera. This is from your CNN interview last year. The border is not in crisis, it's being exaggerated for political gain. And here, she flipped to another page, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You called calls for stronger enforcement, fearmongering. That doesn't sound like someone who supports a secure border, Congressman. That sounds like someone pretending it's not a problem at all. Vicente shifted in his seat, his hand brushing the papers in front of him but not picking them up. Context matters. Karoline raised her voice just enough to ride over his. The context is that people are dying, and you've been downplaying it. You can't context your way out of a funeral. The control room must have known they had television gold, because instead of cutting to commercial, they zoomed in tighter on Vicente's face. The sheen of sweat on his forehead told the audience exactly what was happening. The narrative was slipping out of his hands. Tell me, Congressman, Karoline said, leaning in until her voice was low but lethal, if you truly believe the border is secure, why do you have private security at your own events? Why do you demand ID checks for every attendee? Why is your own home surrounded by gates, while you lecture the rest of America about compassion? That question landed like a sledgehammer. The audience made an audible "oh," and even the moderator's eyes darted toward Vicente, waiting for a miracle of a comeback. Vicente stammered, "That's not the same thing." "It's exactly the same thing," Karoline shot back, her voice rising with conviction. "You protect what you value. And your record shows you value yourself more than the people you're sworn to protect." The studio broke into loud applause, some even standing. The sound rolled over Vicente like a wave, drowning out his attempted rebuttal. Karoline straightened in her chair, letting the moment breathe. The cameras caught it all, the unflinching stare, the quiet confidence, the crowd rallying behind her. This was no longer a debate. It was a public reckoning. Vicente tried to steady his breathing, his jaw tightening as if he could will the conversation back under his control. "Karoline, you're making this personal." Karoline leaned back just enough to smile, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "It's already personal, Congressman. You made it personal the day you told the people in your district that the border crisis was manufactured." She reached down again, this time pulling out a stack of handwritten letters. The paper edges were frayed, the ink slightly smudged. These weren't just documents, they were voices. "These," she said, holding them high for the camera, "are letters from your own constituents. People who live in the towns you claim to represent. People who've lost family members, businesses, and their sense of safety because of policies you supported." The audience shifted forward, silent now, sensing the blow about to land. Karoline unfolded the first letter and began to read, her voice steady and unflinching. "My husband was killed by someone who crossed illegally last year. When I reached out to your office, I was told to be more understanding of their situation. I'll never forgive that." Gasps rippled through the studio. Vicente's eyes darted to the moderator, silently pleading for an intervention that wasn't coming. Karoline moved to the next letter. "We've been robbed 3 times. We lock our doors at all hours. You say the border is fine, but we're the ones living in fear." She paused, letting the silence crush any hope Vicente had of a quick recovery. "Do you want to look into that camera, Congressman?" she asked, her voice icy, "and tell these people again that there's no crisis? Go ahead. Say it now. Let America hear it." Vicente opened his mouth, but no words came out. The camera lingered on his face, catching the faint twitch in his jaw, the involuntary swallow. Karoline pressed the advantage. "You lecture the nation about compassion, yet you can't even show it to the people who put you in office. Is that leadership, or is it just politics?" The audience erupted, cheers, applause, even a few shouts of "answer her." The moderator's attempts to restore order were drowned out entirely. For the first time all night, Vicente's shoulders slumped. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a public trial, and the jury was watching in real time. The studio lights felt hotter now, not because of the temperature, but because the tension was suffocating. Vicente tried to recover, leaning toward his microphone. Karoline, you're cherry-picking isolated incidents. Karoline didn't let him finish. She leaned forward sharply, eyes locked on him like a hawk. Isolated incidents? You mean lives, families? You call that isolated? Her voice cut through the room like glass. Then, without warning, she turned toward the production crew. Roll the clip. The big screen behind them flickered to life. A familiar news segment began to play. A younger Vicente Gonzalez in a local TV interview, smiling confidently. The border is more secure now than it's been in decades. Any reports of increased crime are exaggerated for political gain. The audience reacted instantly, boos, murmurs, even some laughter at the sheer contrast with his current defensive posture. Karoline raised her hand, silencing them. And now, Congressman, let's compare that to what you said just last month. She motioned again, and another clip began. This time, it was Vicente in a national interview, looking grim. We must admit there's been a significant increase in illegal crossings. But we need to approach it with empathy. Karoline turned back to him, tilting her head ever so slightly. So which is it, Congressman? Secure for decades? Or a significant increase? Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Vicente's jaw clenched, and his lips pressed into a thin line. The moderator glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to step in. Karoline took a slow breath, as if savoring the moment. You see, America, this is what happens when career politicians think they can rewrite reality. They forget the internet exists. They forget we have receipts. The crowd roared, half in disbelief, half in exhilaration. Someone shouted, "Play it again," and the laughter spread. Vicente reached for his water glass, his hand trembling slightly. "This isn't fair," he started. Karoline leaned in just enough for the cameras to catch every word. "What's unfair," she said, voice low but lethal, "is telling struggling families that their suffering is imaginary, just because it's politically convenient for you." The moderator called for a commercial break, but the image of Vicente's frozen expression was already burned into the viewers' minds. The commercial break ended, but Vicente Gonzalez still hadn't recovered. His posture was tense, his eyes darting toward the floor monitors as if hoping for some cue to save him. The audience, however, was leaning forward, sensing they were about to witness a career-defining collapse. Karoline adjusted her microphone with deliberate slowness, never breaking eye contact. "Congressman, before we move on, I think it's only fair to bring in some other voices from your own party." Vicente blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" Karoline gestured to the screen behind them. "Roll that clip." The screen lit up with footage from a recent closed-door meeting that had somehow leaked to the press. Several prominent members of Gonzalez's own party were speaking candidly. "We can't defend Vicente's mixed messaging anymore. It's hurting us in the polls. Every time he opens his mouth about the border, we lose credibility with swing voters." The audience erupted, gasps, laughter, a few outright cheers. Vicente's jaw visibly tightened. Karoline tilted her head just slightly, her tone dripping with a calm, almost surgical precision. "That's not me talking, Congressman. That's not a Republican talking. That's your own colleagues. So tell America, are they wrong too?" Vicente stammered, This is taken out of context." Karoline leaned forward, her voice rising just enough to cut through his attempted spin. "Out of context? Or out of patience? Because, Congressman, the border crisis isn't just a talking point. It's reality for millions of Americans. And every time you flip-flop, you're not just confusing your voters, you're betraying them." The moderator tried to interject, "All right, let's keep this civil." But Karoline wasn't done. She reached into the stack of papers in front of her and pulled out a printout. "Here's a letter from a small business owner in your own district. She writes," and I quote, Karoline's voice softened, but the words carried the weight of a hammer. "Congressman Gonzalez, you told us the border was safe. My store was robbed twice in 6 months. My nephew was attacked walking home from work. If you can't protect us, at least stop pretending everything is fine. The room fell silent. The only sound was the hum of the studio lights. Karoline placed the letter down gently, then turned back to Vicente with a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's not partisan politics, Congressman. That's the voice of the people you swore to serve. Maybe it's time you start listening to them instead of spinning for the cameras. The audience exploded again, half clapping, half shouting in disbelief at how cornered he now looked. Vicente's hands clenched around his notes, his face a storm of frustration and embarrassment. By now, it was clear, this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a public reckoning. By the time the cameras returned from the second commercial break, the energy in the studio had shifted entirely. Vicente Gonzalez sat rigid in his chair, his smile forced, his body language screaming discomfort. Karoline, on the other hand, was leaning forward slightly, eyes sharp, posture relaxed, like a prosecutor who knew the verdict was already decided. The moderator attempted to reset the tone. Let's move to closing remarks on this topic. Karoline didn't wait. Before we close, I think the American people deserve an answer to one simple question. Congressman, do you still stand by your statement from last month that the border is, quote, more secure than ever? Vicente shifted in his seat. Well, security is a complex issue. Karoline cut in with surgical precision. It's a yes or no, Congressman. Do you stand by it? The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was deafening. Vicente opened his mouth, then shut it again, searching for the right words. The audience, sensing the moment, began murmuring. Karoline leaned back, allowing the pause to grow heavier. You can't say yes, and you can't say no. And that, Congressman, is the entire problem. Leaders are supposed to lead, not dodge. While you sit here calculating your answer, real people, your constituents, are paying the price. She reached for another document, sliding it toward the moderator. This is a Department of Homeland Security report from 2 weeks ago. It shows a 42% increase in illegal crossings in the last quarter alone. That's not secure. That's a crisis. And you knew it when you said otherwise. Vicente tried to recover. Reports can be interpreted. Karoline's eyes locked on him like a laser. Interpret all you want, Congressman. But facts don't bend just because they're inconvenient to your party line. The audience roared, cheers, whistles, and even a few standing applauses from the back rows. Cameras zoomed in on Vicente's face, capturing every flicker of discomfort. His eyes darted toward the moderator, as if begging for rescue, but none came. Karoline delivered the final strike with calm, deliberate enunciation. You called the border secure while families were being torn apart. You promised safety while crime was spilling over. That's not leadership, it's negligence. And tonight, America sees it for what it is. For a split second, Vicente looked as if he might fire back, but instead, he exhaled, his shoulders sagging. The fight was gone. The moderator cleared his throat. All right. I think we've. Karoline didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes on Vicente as she leaned into the microphone one last time. You can't hide from the truth forever, Congressman. Not here. Not anymore. The studio went silent again, and then the applause hit like a wave, louder than anything all night. People weren't just clapping, they were on their feet, phones out, capturing the moment that would dominate headlines by morning. Vicente stared down at his notes, his political armor shattered on live television. And Karoline? She simply smiled, as if to say, next time, come prepared. As soon as the cameras cut to commercial, the studio erupted into a low buzz, staffers scrambling, audience members talking over each other, and production assistants darting toward the control room. But the real explosion was already happening outside those walls. Within 2 minutes, clips of Karoline's takedown had hit Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. One 15-second snippet, Karoline leaning in and saying, "That's not leadership, it's negligence," was shared over 20,000 times before the show even wrapped. The hashtag border truth bomb was climbing so fast it overtook every trending political topic in the US by the end of the hour. In the hallway outside the studio, Karoline walked with quiet confidence, ignoring the flashes from a swarm of reporters. Microphones were shoved toward her. "Karoline, do you think Congressman Gonzalez will respond to your remarks?" She didn't slow her pace. He already did. His silence said it all. Back inside the green room, Vicente sat slumped in a chair, phone buzzing relentlessly. His aides whispered frantically, one holding up a tablet with live social media reactions. Headlines reading, "Levitt eviscerates Gonzalez on live TV," and "Border security lie exposed in real time." The damage was spreading faster than they could contain it. Conservative outlets replayed the exchange on loop, while even some neutral commentators admitted that Vicente had been cornered without an exit. Meanwhile, Karoline was already on her phone, retweeting a clip from a veteran's account that read, "Finally, someone said what we've all been thinking." Her own caption? Just 3 words, "Truth always wins." By morning, the clip had over 8.7 million views. Talk radio hosts dissected every second of the showdown, and late-night comedians reluctantly acknowledged Karoline's brutal efficiency. Even some of Vicente's usual allies distanced themselves, calling his performance a missed opportunity and politically damaging. 2 days later, poll numbers in his district showed a sharp dip in approval ratings. The blow wasn't just a momentary PR hit, it was the kind of televised embarrassment that leaves a mark for years. But Karoline didn't dwell on the victory. In an exclusive follow-up interview, she told a national morning show, "It's never about embarrassing someone, it's about holding leaders accountable. If you can't handle tough questions, you shouldn't hold public office." The host smiled. "So, you're saying you'd do it again?" Karoline's eyes narrowed slightly, the same look she'd given Vicente in that now famous moment. "Let's just say, if the truth needs defending, I'm always ready." The segment ended, and the clip rolled once more, her words echoing across the country, replayed millions of times, cementing the night she didn't just win an argument, she rewrote the conversation. What you just witnessed wasn't about party lines or political games, it was about truth. In a time when spin and half-truths dominate the conversation, one moment of courage can cut through the noise. Karoline Levitt didn't just defend her beliefs, she held a sitting congressman accountable in front of the entire nation. And in doing so, she reminded us all, leadership isn't about avoiding hard questions, it's about answering them with honesty. The question is, how many more will have the courage to do the same?